Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into two incredibly different but absolutely devastating forces of nature. We're talking about the invisible world of biological outbreaks and the unstoppable, massive force of extreme weather. Basically, disasters coming straight from the living world and the sky right above us. But as we've explored before, there's this fundamental truth we've got to keep in mind. A hazard only really becomes a disaster when it meets a community that just isn't prepared. So how on earth do we engineer true resilience against the germs and the storms? Well, let's find out.
Okay, so first things first, we really need to understand the scale of a biological threat. That is our very first step in preparedness. On one hand, we've got epidemics. These are geographically contained spikes in a disease. They're pretty localized. But then you have pandemics, and these are beasts of a completely different nature. They spread across entire continents and require a whole-of-society management approach. We're not just talking about a health crisis here. We are talking about a massive systemic shock that cascades through our economy, our schools, literally our daily lives.
So here is our roadmap for today. We're splitting this into two halves. First, we'll cover the microscopic pathogens, invisible threats, the One Health framework, and the cold chain. Then we pivot to the macroscopic weather systems, looking at weather whiplash, impact-based forecasting, and how we engineer true resilience.
Let's jump into Section 1, Invisible and Unstoppable Threats, Understanding Nigeria's Chronic Disasters.
Let's take a close look at how recurrent, chronic disasters just silently drain a country's public health capacity, and we'll use Nigeria's endemic burden as a prime example here. Look at the sheer scale of where these threats actually come from. A staggering 75% of new emerging diseases are zoonotic. That means they use a biological bridge to jump right from animals into human populations. And why does this happen? Well, when we cut down forests or encroach on wildlife habitats, we're basically building that bridge for viruses. In places like Nigeria, chronic threats like loss of fever, meningitis, and cholera strike year after year. They quietly drain the public health capacity long before a massive, headline-grabbing emergency ever happens.
Moving on to Section 2, the One Health framework, which is all about uniting human, animal, and environmental monitoring.
So how do we watch those zoonotic bridges we just talked about? The One Health framework is our systemic solution here. We absolutely cannot just rely on doctors waiting in hospitals for sick patients to show up. We need veterinarians and environmental scientists working directly in tandem with public health officials. It's this crucial triad: human health, animal health, and environmental health, all monitored as one big interconnected system so we can proactively manage and prevent outbreaks.
And we actually saw this framework's incredible potential during the 2014 Ebola response in Lagos. How did they manage to stop a highly contagious virus in a densely populated megacity? They literally treated it like a tactical military operation. They set up a single incident commander to streamline all the decisions. They used super aggressive, rapid contact tracing to break the chain of transmission. And most importantly, they built community trust through radically transparent communication. They successfully intercepted the shock before it could paralyze the entire city.
Which brings us to Section 3, Mastering the Cold Chain. Logistics really is the silent hero of public health. Now, here's where it gets incredibly tricky. When an outbreak hits, mass vaccination is for sure our strongest weapon, but vaccines are exceptionally fragile. They must be kept strictly between 2 and 8 degrees Celsius. Think about that journey. That exact temperature has to be maintained from the moment it leaves the manufacturer, flies on an airplane, sits in a national warehouse, bounces around in a truck, and finally reaches a patient in a rural village. We call this the cold chain, and maintaining it is a massive logistical hurdle.
I mean, think about the stakes here. If a rural fridge breaks down or the power grid just fails, the medicine inside quickly becomes completely useless. It is a total loss. That's exactly why modern disaster managers are pivoting so hard to resilient off-grid solutions. They're prioritizing solar-powered refrigeration and using these brilliant passive vaccine carriers that can stay right in that critical 2 to 8 degree window for days without ever needing to be plugged in. It's this kind of proactive, smart logistics that is the true silent hero of disaster management.
All right, let's switch gears for Section 4, the era of weather whiplash. This is when the sky itself becomes the threat. So we are shifting our gaze from the microscopic cold chain down here on Earth to the massive atmospheric systems way above us. We're currently living in what scientists are calling an era of weather whiplash. Driven by climate projections from now until 2050, we know that a warmer atmosphere actually holds about 7% more moisture per degree of warming. This physics reality traps us in a crazy paradox. Places like West Africa are experiencing incredibly intense, localized flooding and rising sea levels, while simultaneously suffering from longer, much more severe droughts.
You literally get whipped back and forth between extremes.
Take flooding, for example, which happens to be Nigeria's most costly disaster right now. The 2022 floods affected 33 states and displaced over 2 million people. But this wasn't just some bad luck from Mother Nature. As you can see, it was a complete systemic failure. Yes, extreme rainfall ignited the crisis, but the impact was so devastating because of poor urban planning, literally building homes directly on known floodplains, and widespread deforestation, which completely stripped the land of its natural ability to absorb that excess water.
That brings us to Section 5, Impact-Based Forecasting, or predicting what the weather will actually do.
Because of all this, our historical data, like the whole concept of a 100-year flood, actually, scratch that. That data is totally obsolete now. We are facing a profound paradigm shift. For decades, we predicted what the weather would be. Now, we absolutely must predict what the weather will do. That is impact-based forecasting. It's all about taking raw meteorological data and instantly translating it into actionable intelligence for vulnerable communities and critical infrastructure.
Let me give you a perfect example of this. A traditional reactive forecast simply tells you what the sky is doing. It says, hey, it will rain 200 millimeters today. Well, okay, but what does that actually mean for you? If you live down in a valley versus up on a hill, 200 millimeters means something completely different. It just leaves the public to guess their actual danger level. But an impact-based forecast, it doesn't just give you rainfall totals. It says, the Ogunpa River will overflow at 2 a.m. Evacuate the Malete neighborhood right now. It takes the weather data, maps it against the local geography and the urban infrastructure, and tells you exactly who is in danger and what specific action they need to take immediately before lives get destroyed. It's a real game changer.
And we have to apply this exact same anticipatory logic to the silent killer of extreme heat. As our cities grow denser, they trap heat, creating these brutal urban heat islands. When temperatures cross 40 degrees, we need heat health action plans. These are simple but totally life-saving step-by-step plans. Drink water consistently. Stay indoors during peak sun hours between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. And crucially, activate your community networks to check on the elderly and outdoor laborers who are the most at risk.
Finally, Section 6, Engineering True Resilience, moving from reactive relief to proactive planning.
Whether we're talking about a biological pathogen or an extreme weather event, these are systemic shocks. They cascade through everything. But the good news is we can intercept them. The old way of doing things is reactive relief. That's handing out supplies after the farm is already flooded or the village is already sick. Our future has to be anticipatory action. This means using impact-based forecasts for slow-onset disasters like droughts or the One Health framework for viruses to act before the shock even hits. It's like sending out drought-resistant seeds before the rain fails instead of just handing out food aid after the crops die. Ultimately, it's summed up perfectly right here. Disaster management is no longer just about relief. It's about engineering a world that can withstand the unexpected. It's about deliberately designing our cities, our supply chains, and our communication networks to bend but never break under the pressure of the natural world.
So I'm going to leave you with this provocative question to chew on. Is your community just relying on luck right now, or are you actively engineering resilience against the invisible and the unstoppable? Seriously, take a hard look at your own neighborhood's preparedness. Check your drainage, your local health networks, your community ties. We have the data, we have the frameworks, and we absolutely have the tools. Now it's just up to us to build it so we can stop the next hazard from becoming a catastrophe. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Stay safe, keep planning, and I'll see you next time.